Jim, right in the opening of your latest book, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investing, Chapter 1 is titled, Swim Your Own Races. Do not let others do your thinking for you. If people around you try to discourage you from taking a certain course of action or ridicule your ideas, take that as a positive sign. What is the proper contrarian play today then, Jim? Because many people were ridiculing you when you first recommended commodities right at the bottom before the CRB tripled. There are very few today recommending commodities. Are they the contrarian play again at these low levels?
One reason I did recommend commodities because the CRB was such a hopeless index. CRB and all the other indexes back in those days were ludicrous. They were not very representative of the commodities markets, which was a sign to me that people didn't understand, we're not looking at the commodities markets at all. But Eric, I've often been ridiculed with my investments. The more ridicule, the better, usually. Doesn't mean I don't make mistakes. I plenty of the times do, but in the investment world, in most aspects of life, if people ridicule your ideas, you're either a total nut or a genius. You just have to figure out which one.
This is a quote from a Bloomberg TV interview you did yesterday. Quote, the government is printing lots of money and borrowing even more. That's not the basis for a sound currency. The idea that anybody would lend money to the U.S. government for 30 years at 3 or 4 or 5 or 6% is mind-boggling to me. Let's look at the debt to GDP for just a minute, which was around 290% in the early 30s. Today it's closer to 400%. George Soros said it will get to 500%. Why are countries willing, Jim, to lend the United States money at such low interest rates with such a crippling debt load?
Well, it's not just countries, it's us too. I mean, not me. I don't buy American government bonds, any government bonds for that matter these days. But everybody is lending money to the American government. And I cannot conceive of it. Yes, of course, the amount of debt in the U.S. could double. It could triple. Why not? This sort of thing has happened before in history, but does not mean it's sound. The NASDAQ back in the late 90s doubled from what were absurd levels. And, it continued to double. So this sort of thing can happen when markets go nuts, but that does not mean that sound investors or rational people have to get involved. And I, for one, would not lend a penny, not just to the U.S. government, to the U.K. government, any government which is pursuing policies like this. And I hope you wouldn't either, Eric.
Well, I remember I was on an interview with John Embry at one time from Canada, and I agreed with what he said entirely, but this goes back to 2003, and he said to me, I wouldn't buy a U.S. bond with your money, Eric. So, believe me, I'm in that camp. Speaking of bonds, have we seen the top in the bond, and I'm asking you to prognosticate here, Jim, but have we seen the top in the bond market? Have we entered a secular bear market in bonds?
Well, I don't know. I'm not very good at short-term trading. I shorted my U.S. bonds a year or so ago, only to find out I was wrong and covered. It was inconceivable to me that the U.S. Central Bank would monetize the American debt, which they became pretty obvious they were going to do, so I covered my short. This is something which has never happened under this central bank, at least to my knowledge, that they've monetized, that they've printed money like this. Very few central banks that have survived have ever done this, and so I figure it would not happen in America, unfortunately. It is happening in America, so what's the top? I don't know. I mean, why can't government bonds go to zero? If they can print enough money and spend enough money, when I say zero, the yields go to zero. Anything can happen, as I've learned over my many years of investing in the financial markets. So I'm not short government bonds at the moment. I certainly expect to be somewhere down the line. Will I get the timing right? Probably not. If my history's any guide, I rarely get the timing very well, but you ask about bubbles or you ask about irrational things going on. The U.S. government bond market is one of the last bubbles left. Not just the U.S., I should say the U.K. I mean, there are various other government bond markets that are among the last bubbles left.
You mentioned the U.K. Because you made a comment not too long ago, but it was something to the effect that the U.K. is finished and that they're in tremendous trouble. What about the U.K.?
Well, I will repeat. I mean, they are in tremendous trouble. They have gigantic debt. A couple of their sources of income in the past 30 years have been the North Sea, which has been drying up, and the City of London, their financial community, which is a mere shambles of its former self, a shadow of its former self, and I don't think you'll see it coming back. So I don't see anything that the UK has to sell to the rest of the world that's going to be strong enough to replace their lost balance of trade income, the income which they're losing from some of their sources. So I see problems going forward for the UK. I don't like saying it. I love the UK. I've been there a lot, done a lot of things there, but one has to face facts. I don't particularly like saying that the U.S. has got serious problems, but we do have tremendous problems going forward. I am an American citizen, American taxpayer. You know, nobody likes to see any country get in trouble. But when they do, one has to face facts or one gets wiped out with everybody else.
When I interviewed Dr. Mark Faber, he talked about how the United States is experiencing inflation already today, and he was quick to point out that this is taking place in the weakest economy since World War II. When will the United States begin to experience tremendous inflation, in your opinion, Jim?
Mark happens to be right. There is inflation in the U.S. Even if you look at the government's numbers, and as you know, I presume you know, the government lies to us and has been lying to us about inflation for a long time, for their own reasons. But even the most recent figures from the Bureau of Labor Statistics show that nearly every category has price increases. They were offset by the drop in energy prices, but had energy prices not dropped, even the government's price increases that they announced would be much higher. Now, it's interesting that when energy prices were going higher, the government did not pay much attention to them, and they said, you know, we can ignore them, or for whatever reasons, they smoothed them out. But now that they're going down, you know, they pay a lot of attention to them. So the government plays its games. It has its own agenda, which is fine. Everybody probably has an agenda, but you know, in the government's case, we need to at least understand it because it affects us more than just about anything else. And the prices, I mean, I'm sure you shop, or maybe you don't. Maybe your butler does your shopping, but for the rest of us who go out and buy things, we know that prices are going up. And all of this gibberish about lower prices or deflation is just, it's insane.
You brought up oil. Let's talk about oil. Boone Pickens stated today that oil will go back to $147 in 3 years and $300 in 10 years. What are your thoughts on oil's fundamentals, Jim? Because countries are not investing properly in their oil infrastructure, so there are rust issues and future supply issues, are there not?
Well, there's no question then that the supply of oil is under serious duress. The International Energy Agency recently did a study, and they're the only group in the world that can go around to every country and find the real story, did a study and came to the realization that the reserves of oil